Greetings! In this video I'm going to cover HTML attributes. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so what attributes are, in the previous video we talked about elements. Now attributes, what they are, is they provide additional information about those elements. In other words, let's say for example we have an element called A, or for a link. Okay? So I have an opening A tag and a closing A tag. Okay? And inside this tag I have what's called an attribute. Now in most cases when you have an A tag, it's usually a link to something like a web page or a document or a picture or whatever, a link to something. So the attribute would be href. In this case it's a hypertext or a hyperlink reference. Basically it's a link. Okay? And then I need to say, well, where do I want this link to go? Okay, so then I'd have an equal sign, an open quote, and then let's say we want to go to CNN.com, for example. So I'll type in the URL for CNN. And then inside the element, after the opening A tag, then I'll type in a description of the link. In this case, I'll say, click here to go to CNN. Okay. So what this is, well, it's a link. It's a link to CNN with a description that says click here to go to CNN. The attribute here inside this element is right here under href. Okay. The attribute is it's a link. It goes to CNN.com. Now, one of the things that you'll want to make sure that you do in HTML when you're coding is to quote your attribute values. Okay? So any kind of value that you have for a specific attribute would be in quotes. You have an open quote, and this is a double quote, and then whatever the value of the attribute is, and then a close quote when you're done. Okay? It makes for good coding. In other words, I know that, oh, this is an A tag, this is and then my attribute is href. The value of that inside of these quotes, because it's inside quotes, it's after the equal sign. I know what this is. Oh, it's a link to CNN. Let me pull that back up here. Okay. One of the things that you'll want to do too is, whenever possible, use what are called lowercase attributes. In other words, now I could type in this attribute value here all uppercase CNN.com. Okay, but I don't want to do that. It's not good coding practice. The best practices when you're setting up your attributes is to make sure that they're lowercase whenever possible, okay, unless you have some very specific reason to make them uppercase. It just makes good coding sense. It's easy to read, and that's standard coding practice, best practices. Now, one of the things that you'll see is several different elements have different attributes. So, for example, let's say I have an image. And in my image I have an attribute called source, and then its value would be whatever the URL of an image is. So, and then there's another one called alt, which is another attribute for image, and that is, if I can't display the image, let's display some text so the browser knows what it's supposed to be displaying. For example, if you have somebody who's blind, or if the image can't load, they can hover over what the image was supposed to be, and it would give them the alternative text. So in this case, let's say the image is a box of popcorn or something. I can say for my alt, the image is a box of popcorn. Now I'm going to go over all this in great detail when we start talking about images, but for right now this kind of gives you an example of another attribute here. Okay, so anyways, any element that you have has specific attributes that can be used with it, and then they all have their types of values and how it's all supposed to be set up and all that. But what I wanted to kind of show you here with this image here is that here is an example in this alt attribute where you would actually use some uppercase and some lowercase because it's the description of what you're supposed to be seeing in the picture. And if you're looking at proper English, if you're saying this is a picture of a box of popcorn, well, that's a sentence. So the sentence would begin with a lowercase letter, okay? And it would probably end with a period at the end of the sentence. There you go. Okay. All right. So as far as attributes go, that's pretty much a brief description of what an attribute is. The big thing to remember is that every element has its own specific types of attributes, how they're formatted, how they're supposed to be set up, that kind of stuff. And as we go through, you'll learn a lot about that. This video is just kind of a brief description. If I say, hey, tell me what the available attributes are for image, and you'll be able to go, oh, I know what an attribute is. Let me look it up. Okay, here they are. Okay. Anyways, that's pretty much it for this video. In the next video, we'll talk a little bit about headings.